Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I request everyone to take their seats, please? We can start the session. Please take your seats. We would like to start the session. Are we all here? Let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you all for joining us here today as we gather to explore ideas, challenge perspectives, and chalk out the way forward in a dialogue that will shape the future of global collaboration. Your presence here makes it truly special. Let me begin with the good news, actually. Well, the ceasefire between the US and Iran, that's good news, and let's hope the situation improves from here. We would agree that the West Asian crisis and the uncertainty in that region have brought unprecedented challenges with the potential to leave a lasting imprint on the global socio economic order. We are going through a rapid transformation, paving the way for a new and emerging framework. One thing is sure, one thing is certain, this emerging landscape will be shaped by the global south, with the BRICS bloc playing a pivotal role. Today, the BRICS bloc, now actually an 11-member grouping, accounts for over 35% of the global GDP and is home to about 4 billion people. Its growing influence makes it central to the discussions on supply chains, economic resilience, and strategic realignment. To explore the role and future roadmap of BRICS in this shifting environment, the Secretariat, in collaboration with Pahle India Foundation, supported by the Spark Forum, presents the India BRICS Dialogue. Well, this is going to be a three-part series. The first one, of course, is being held today. Now, allow me to quickly introduce you to the organizers. The Secretariat, it's a digital first newsroom focused on policy, economy, governance, and bureaucracy. Promoted by SML Digital Media, it serves as a non-partisan chronicler of public policy developments and their interface with business and society. We offer in depth analysis across areas such as economics, geoeconomics, technology, climate change, so on so forth. Pahle India Foundation, led by Dr. Rajiv Kumar, former vice chairperson of Niti Aayog, is a leading think tank committed to the idea of putting India first to make India first. The foundation emphasizes on evidence-based policymaking through deep stakeholder engagement at the grassroots level. We now start our first session, Global Realignment Amid the West Asian Crisis. This theme is not only central to BRICS discussions, but is also being closely examined the world over. To discuss this, we are joined by a very, very distinguished panel. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Chairman, Pahle India Foundation, former Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya, now professor at OP Jindal University, Mr. Mikhail Ponster, first Secretary, Embassy of Russia in India. The session will be moderated by Dr. Jain Singh, former Chief Secretary of Gujarat. Thank you once again for joining us today. Sir, the stage is all yours. Thank you so much.
Friends, a very distinguished panel. Good morning to all of you. Uh, Today's session, till very morning, early morning, things were changing. And even now, things have changed, continue to change, how the things are moving. So if anybody of you has not woken up early in the morning or have not gone through the tweets or had depended only on the newspapers, then you have missed something. You have missed something very, very big. What has happened in the impacts, the financial impacts, oil has come down by almost 10%, below $100. Gold has gone up by almost 4%. Nikkei, which is the first uh, market to open, has gone up almost 5%. Kospi, the Korean one, has gone up by 6%. Hang Seng, the Hong Kong, has gone up by 2.8%. What has happened? The Dow futures again has jumped by 2.2%. Our great neighbor, Pakistan, mediated, and President Trump mentioned His Excellency Shahbaz Sharif and His Excellency Asim Munir by in his tweet, truth, social. So that particular thing that they have mediated and a 2 week ceasefire. Now American X and on thread, both of them are huge controversies raging on as to whether America has surrendered more or has America gained more. So those things are already going on. Whether Iran would be continue to charge stall or would not continue to charge stall. What has happened, the Strait of Hormuz, will it be under the control of Iran or will it be like a global maritime, trade route, like a free trade route? So all those things are going on. We are yet to get the contours of what is happening. The next 2 weeks will only show us what's clear, what will be clear. So these are the very facts. These are the facts. But if you look, telescope it further, what's happening to USA? Has it gone down, gone up? Overall, in the last few years, has it lost its primacy? Its dollar, is it continuously losing strength? Is the US financially losing strength? Is the BRICS going up? Uh, 20, 30 years back, 40 years back, when I was in JNU in international studies, we had a thing called non alignment. Still, many of you, the younger generation, might have forgotten what is non alignment. But non alignment, is BRICS something like non alignment which is coming? Are we seeing something like the third world or the non European or the non Western forces joining in the BRICS? But even in the Western world, there is a very clear demarcation right now between USA on one side and maybe the European Union, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, trying to find a way out. And I cannot forget the very seminal words of Mike Carney. He talked of the middle powers, that if you are not on the table, you are on the menu. So middle powers would like to chart a way away from the one and the only superpower 10 years back. Now the world is seeing multipolarity. The world is seeing at least, if not multipolarity, two dual powers. So in 2010, when BRICS was formed, there was unipolar world. So BRICS had that relevance. Now, in the scenario when multipolarity is there, would all the members of BRICS like to be with China only, or would they like to have an independent path? So there are various modalities. The world is so dynamically changing before our eyes that yet to, it's very dizzy. You feel dizzy about the entire thing. What's the long term impact of the Western thing? We are going to discuss that. What is the long term impact on energy? Is it going to, sustain like this? Is it going to be the volatile like this? What's going to be the food and fertilizer? 40% of fertilizer so far was, being manufactured in Qatar. Now 40% of the even in USA, we are having fertilizer issue. India, the fertilizer urea, we are started problem. Will it lead to food crisis in the next 6 months, 1 year? Those are the things. The industrial disruption, helium in particular for semiconductors, chips for the medical imaging. These are the things which have started in the next 3 months, 6 months because of the delay. We are going to start having aviation. Many of the world's leading Qatar, particularly the Gulf Airways, they have parked their planes elsewhere. Many of the other flights, they have reduced flying. The shipping, global shipping, that has suffered a big blow, and Gulf has a market on the whole. So all over the world, very dynamic things are going on. There is a tremendous amount of realignment which is happening. So today we are going to discuss. It will be more of an interactive session, but prior to that, I'll request all the three of my colleagues to say in 7 to 10 minutes, maybe even lesser, Give their points. I mean, it should be point. It should not be a very long speech. I'll start with Sanjay, and then Mikhail, and finally Rajiv ji. You would like to sum up, but the more important thing, we would like to have question answer session, a bigger question answer session. Thank you. Sanjay, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's delightful to be here, and thanks for the good news, which I think many of us would have come across, that there is a pause in the war. I emphasize there's a pause in the war, and we also got to see whether this is a pause that is affected only by Iran and the United States, or whether it is something that's going to be abided by Israel as well, which is one of the belligerents in this particular instance. In the world of diplomacy, which I inhabited for close to 4 decades, um, we have a grand strategy, which is the broad plan, which continues, and then there is crisis management. And in my perception and understanding, what we saw over the last month and a little more was crisis management. And it wasn't a crisis management that came all of a sudden, because we know that the deployments were happening for a very long period of time, that in summer last there was a 12-day war. So this was going to happen. And I think we had our powder dry. And I think many of the things that we did were focused on that. So I just leave that particular situation of West Asia to my broad comments that I made just now and address the key issue of how India and BRICS can play a role or should play a role or can possibly play a role in the emerging geopolitical, geoeconomic sphere. And what I thought was I'll try and divide my brief presentation into two themes. One is BRICS at 20, and the other is BRICS after 20. We often forget that in 2006, in the margins of the G8 meeting, where they had 5 outreach countries, President Putin, President Hu Jintao, and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh met, and they decided that they would create BRICS. They directed their foreign ministers to meet in New York, and they added the addition of Brazil. And so, in the margins of the UNGA in 2006, the BRICS idea was born. It was not till 2009 that we had the first summit, again in Russia. And by that time, Medvedev was the president of Russia. A lot has happened since then. But I think what BRICS has proved is that it is what I call a Gen Z organization. It is a Gen Z organization. It's agile, it's adaptable, it's forward looking, and it's open. And I teach in a university these days, so I come across a lot of very young people. And I must say that in many ways, BRICS reflects that particular mentality, although it came from statesmen who were a little older than what we would call Gen Z. So, what are I thought I'd kind of sum it down in 3 points of what BRICS has done when we are celebrating the 20th anniversary. And Jaishankar, in his opening remarks, when we unveiled the theme, talked of it in that particular context of the 2 decades of BRICS. And I think we should recognize that. The first is celebration. The second is about contribution and consolidation. And the third is the configuration for the future. And I think this is what BRICS has been doing throughout. So what do I mean by saying in terms of celebrating? BRICS is a celebration of emerging powers. And right from the outset, when Goldman Sachs wrote that paper, they wrote that paper because they wanted the G7, G8 to actually work with these EMDCs, emerging markets and developing countries, so that they would continue to have higher rates on their investments overseas. But what it was not regional powers, not middle powers, but emerging powers that sought to be global powers, which had a sense of global responsibility. And I think that's what the original founding fathers of BRICS all were. And therefore, I see it as one in which the original five, the founding five, as we often call it, was providing space economic and diplomatic, for their engagement with the changing geopolitics and geoeconomics. And it was such a successful model that the line outside the BRICS door is longer than you can imagine. So today, as you pointed out, we are 11 members with 10 partners, and there are so many more who wish to come. It's not a closed club, unlike the G7. It's a club that is inclusive and wants people to come in. The second thing that it did, other than give this hope, was to develop a working style which was inclusive. BRICS is one organization where the agenda and decision making are based on consensus. And that's the only way ahead where you can go ahead in this very divided, fragmented world. Because there will be many opinions, there will be many thoughts, but you have to accommodate what is the least common. And that's what BRICS does. And I think that is another aspect that needs to be celebrated. BRICS does not want war. And I think when you break that idea of having a consensus, of exercising power unilaterally, that's when you get to war. And that's when you get all these problems today, as we do. So I think BRICS has a lot to celebrate, a lot to offer. The second is consolidate. And this is something that, over a period of time, BRICS has expanded its agenda. It's got many, many functions. A recent study done by the Brazilian presidency last year did a stock taking exercise, and it found that we had about 190 different mechanisms that work. About 50% of them are largely G2G, government to government. And they work well because, governments combined, they can coordinate things themselves. There is a lot that is G2B with business, and there's a lot that is B2B, but that is roughly about a quarter or less. And the one that is between civil society and people, which is very important. And I think in some ways, BRICS is quite an exception that it provides such a focus, is about 25%. And what the Brazilian presidency had done and what the Indian presidency or the chairship would wish to continue is to have a consolidation. Many of these were good ideas, but maybe they have changed with times. And we have new ideas that are coming up. So let's have a looking at this. And the first Sherpas meeting did exactly this. So when we do have the subsequent meetings, we have the ministerials, we have the summit, we have the business platforms at work. We will actually be trying to consolidate and build an agenda for the future. The third is, what is this agenda that we are looking for? We need to configure an idea that will serve us in the days to come. And I think Jaishankar put it as, a new definition of BRICS, because he said building for resilience, innovation, sustainability, and cooperation. So that is like the new acronym of big BRICS. That's a great start. And when the Sherpas invited the partner countries to come in for the first time to join the session, I think we saw that idea of inclusivity coming about. That idea, when Prime Minister said that this is not the era for war, which is carried on to BRICS, that is the idea that we wish to have in the new configuration. So I think there are many ideas that are brewing. And I'll now move to the second phase, which is, what do we need to do? Today, we find that while geopolitics is an extremely important and compelling argument, and we are often at the other end of the stick on that, geoeconomics is a reality that we have to deal with. The success of BRICS has really been in the economic front. The idea of BRICS was also to bring about economic development, empowerment of its citizens, and I think that's the reason why its success was so popular, giving that economic space to all aspiring emerging economies and emerging powers. And so, to my mind, that should be the focus, the economic focus. And this has been said again. I think the Indian chairship wishes to put that as a central focus. It's not that geopolitics is dead. The Middle East is discussed in three different forums in the BRICS format. There is a separate Middle East track, there's a foreign minister's track, and there's the National Security Advisors track. So in three different forums, they discuss this very critical issue. But we need to kind of look ahead. And I think when we look at the economic part of it, there are a number of establishments that have institutions and mechanisms that have been created. The Chinese have come up with some absolutely remarkable ideas about economic cooperation, which BRICS has embraced and taken forward. And I think what I'm referring to particularly is on the economic mechanisms for new industry, for the innovation center. Because in today's world, which is dictated by technology, you really need to work together on that particular front. But we can take it further because there are many new possibilities for building resilient supply chains. BRICS nations can be at the core of it. And there is another aspect, which is about trade and investment. Of course, the NDB, which was set up by all the BRICS members and now has expanded to include other countries as well, has been at the core of funding investment and infrastructure for development. Apart from that, there are trade and investment issues, the kind of financing, the settlement mechanisms that we've talked about, the BRICS pay, for instance. There is no BRICS currency. I don't think that's ever happening. Sometimes this comes up, but I don't think that's really a point that the BRICS members need to worry about. The second is about the political issue. We cannot ignore the political. And in this age of multipolarity, there is need for greater cohesion in global governance. I must say that BRICS, apart from providing a platform where you have the opportunity to raise your aspirations, has not been able to provide the reform in global governance structures, the multilateral system of the UN and others, to the extent that it could have. Some of it, some of the failing lies within ourselves. And I think we need to kind of correct this in the larger interest of humanity so that we can bring about this larger aspect of going back to multilateralism. This kind of thing where power is king is not really the way ahead. And I don't think that's the way BRICS thinks about it. So we do need to have some sort of mechanisms and understandings on that. The third that I think is that BRICS needs to work much more towards capacity for crisis management. We've done a lot of work on the other kinds of crises, whether they're social, pandemic, economic crisis. We've done some work on that. And I think a lot of that has succeeded. And that provides a template, which is for crisis management of political situations and developments. And that is basically about when wars break out. Can we have a mechanism within BRICS that comes out? I congratulate Pakistan for having taken the initiative or having led to take the initiative in bringing about this situation that we see today in West Asia. Uh, because for me, the halting of war is as important as a step towards the ending of war. And I congratulate the Pakistanis for their effort. But could BRICS have done it? And as you know, after this particular conflagration broke out, there were various consultations amongst the Sherpas and at some of the national security levels amongst BRIC members. And there was a lot of common understanding that was evolving. But we need to take that further to see how crisis management can become a serious aspect of the BRICS agenda. Uh, if I look at the world today, there are conflict situations and hotspots in four different themes and areas. The first is in the South China Sea, where the excessive use of force by a BRICS member is creating tensions in certain parts of that region. And that has repercussions because today we talk of the Strait of Hormuz, but there are equally important implications about the Straits of the Malaccas and leading on to the South China Sea and the sea lanes of communication. The second is actually happening in Eastern Europe. And I think that's another one where we need to try and bring about the strategic balance that is necessary so that Europe can become change from its moribund existence towards becoming a more active partner. The third, of course, is West Asia, which you talked about, and I think we will have more during the questions. The fourth is the non-state actor participation in forms of terrorism, which happens across geographies. So to conclude, I just wish to make 3 points. The first is we need to focus on improving the conditions for citizens in trying to empower them more. And that is the primary BRICS agenda. and in then providing greater space to emerging powers. And so that this can be a hope for the broader global south or developing countries as well. The second is that BRICS is not anti West. BRICS is not for de dollarization. These are narratives that have been put up by certain vested interests, and BRICS needs to counter that and say that this is not the way ahead. BRICS was born out of the idea of collaboration with the West. That's those narrative issues. And the third is, I think BRICS needs to be focused on its core values, which is it is pragmatic cooperation, it is inclusive cooperation, it is participative cooperation. And I think that's the way ahead that BRICS, that India wishes to steer BRICS in the year ahead, and we wish it great success. And I think it'll have contributions in terms of what global geopolitics and geoeconomics is to. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sanjay. Do I invite Mikhail?
Well, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, very good morning. Let me introduce myself. I'm Surface, First Secretary at the Russian Embassy in New Delhi, and I'm also a member of Russia BRICS team, who's about to rejoin with the team back in Moscow in less than 2 weeks. And the Secretariat and the Pahle India Foundation and also Spark Forum, thank you very much for organizing this important BRICS dialogue and for inviting me. For me, it is a great honor to have the opportunity to share my perspective alongside eminent Indian scholars and policymakers. True giants of strategic thinking, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, mastodon of Indian economic policy, Professor Sanjay Bhattacharya, one of the foremost architects and masterminds of India's BRICS engagement, and our moderator, Dr. Jagdeep Singh, a distinguished statesman with a long record of public service and leadership. For me, it's a privilege for sure. Today's topic, global realignment amid the West Asian crisis, is both complex and urgent. The consequences of this large-scale international crisis caused by the illegal and unprovoked aggression by the United States and Israel against Iran are yet to be seen. Thousands of lives have been lost, including women and children. Schools, hospitals, cultural heritage sites have been destroyed. Diplomatic missions have come under fire, something that directly contradicts the basic norms of international law and the Vienna Conventions. Particularly alarming have been repeated attacks on nuclear facilities, including the Bushehr nuclear power plant. A potential incident could trigger a disaster comparable in scale to the worst nuclear accidents in human history. But the impact does not stop at the battlefield. The crisis is already affecting global energy and food security. Key logistic routes have been disrupted. Energy markets are under pressure. Many countries have been forced to ration fuel. Experts warn of economic downturns and rising inflations, particularly in vulnerable economies. This is why de-escalation is essential. My country has been calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities since the very beginning of the conflict. We believe that a political and diplomatic solution is still possible. The parties should abandon the language of threats, insults, and ultimatums, and avoid actions that could plunge the region into irreversible chaos. The responsible members of the international community must prevent the Middle East from sliding into the abyss of an all-out war that would have long-term tragic consequences for the entire world. The Russian Federation and its international partners are ready to do everything possible towards the end. And for sure, we do support any efforts taken by Russia, by India, by our partners in BRICS and non-BRICS countries that are aimed at bringing this crisis to an end. At the same time, this crisis unfolds in an already fragmented global environment. Trust is declining. The reliance of so-called Western minority on the use of force and pressure undermines the foundation of healthy international cooperation, increases the number of conflicts and humanitarian crises, and fuels instability across the world. Growing protectionism and unilateral destabilizing measures hinder global economic growth and entrench long-term crisis trends, disproportionately affecting developing and least developed countries. In this context, the role of BRICS becomes especially relevant. Today, BRICS represents nearly half of the world's population, occupies more than 30% of the planet's landmass, and produces 40% of the global GDP. These figures impose on BRICS a certain responsibility to be the driving force of the global change and a strong voice of the world majority. BRICS is not just a platform. It's a reflection of a changing reality, where countries of the global south and east, emerging economies, are rightfully seeking a greater role in shaping international rules and institutions and promoting practical cooperation. It's not an anti-Western format, but it's indeed non-Western. And this brings us to a key question. What kind of global order are we building? If it is to be stable, it must be multipolar, free from neo-colonial practices, fair, and based on a genuine balance of interests. This is why the reform of global governance institutions is so important. Despite representing a significant share of global growth, developing countries remain underrepresented in decision-making. But we believe that any adjustments to the UN work, for example, must still strengthen its central role in international affairs and be carried out strictly in accordance with its charter. Bretton Woods institutions should fully reflect the real balance of power in the global economy and not be used as instruments of coercion against those who choose a sovereign course. The WTO should effectively guarantee the fundamental principles of the international trade. Expanding the use of national currencies in mutual settlements and developing independent, resilient financial mechanisms within BRICS is of critical importance now. Among most promising initiatives are cross-border payment initiative, independent settlement and depository infrastructure, reinsurance company. Also, a new investment platform could attract capital to BRICS countries and the broader global south. And a BRICS grain exchange is designed to play a key role in ensuring food security. These projects are not confrontational, but protective in nature, aimed at ensuring equal access to financial tools for development and reducing the vulnerability of national economies to unilateral restrictions. Energy security, for sure, is another critical dimension. The West Asian crisis has once again demonstrated how fragile global supply systems can be. Strengthening cooperation in this area, including through joint efforts and financial instruments, is essential. And for sure, we fully support the priorities set out by India for this year, which include deepening dialogue on global governance reform, combating terrorism, expanding trade and investment cooperation, increasing the use of national currencies, strengthening coordination in energy and healthcare, enhancing collaboration in science and innovation. There is no doubt that India, building on consensus and continuity, will bring both continuity and momentum to BRICS cooperation across all three domains: policy and security, economy and finance, humanitarian and cultural contacts. And we believe that the core principles of BRICS, such as equal dialogue, mutual respect, sovereign equality, collective decision-making, results-oriented approach, and consensus-based decisions can help guide the international community through the current challenges in global politics and economics. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, my fellow panelists, friends, ladies and gentlemen. A great pleasure to be here in this joint program organized by the Secretariat and the Pahle India Foundation on an important issue and topic, and hoping also that international relations will become one of the principal verticals of the Pahle India Foundation along with the Secretariat in times to come, and that this is the beginning of that vertical, as it were. Friends, on the BRICS, I have a 3-point sort of submission. One, that BRICS in its current configuration with the expanded membership has all the necessary resources to make a difference in the global order. That's the first one, that it has the resources, and I'll elaborate on that. Two, that there are enough, more than enough opportunities and challenges for BRICS to make a difference, because the world is today faced with such a fluid situation with all so many transitions. I mean, in our recent book, Ishan Joshi and I point out to the fact that there are 6 global transitions going on simultaneously in the world, and BRICS can actually, intermediate. BRICS can participate in all those 6, but there are challenges and opportunities, essentially saying that the world today requires a configuration like BRICS to make that difference, to contribute to addressing those challenges. And the third point that I'll make is that for doing so, BRICS has to change from being almost only a talk shop to an action shop, because there's something that needs to be done which BRICS must do, and for that, what is required for that to be done. And India, being now getting into the presidency, can actually evolve this agenda for how to make BRICS more influential. On the resources, if you look at the 11 members that we've got today, it's very clear that we have a demographic advantage. We have a demographic dividend. I mean, after all, nearly 50% of the world population. But more importantly, probably 80% of the world's young population today survives in the BRICS. And therefore, they represent tomorrow. Whether it's Egypt or Ethiopia or UAE or India, the Gen Z that Sanjay talked about is concentrated in the BRICS. So therefore, we have a we have resources of the population, the talent, the skills resource that we can contribute to the goal order. Second one is that with the inclusion of Iran and UAE and others, Saudi Arabia, we are now energy surplus. We have the energy dividend that we have. So therefore, we can contribute to that energy availability for the world. And here, BRICS can lead the way from fossil to green energy if we want, because that's the way we can handle it. So that's the other resource that we have. The third one is, of course, that we are now a capital surplus, block, because there are large economies, which have the capital, therefore which can be invested in the changes that we want to do. And finally, especially because of what China has done, and the Institute of Strategic Studies Australia points out to the fact that in China is today leading in about 69 of the 80, technologies, frontier technologies. We have the technological advantage, the innovation advantage, that what Jaishankar talked about, BRICS being an innovation center, etc. So these are significant resources that the BRIC countries, the BRIC member countries, BRIC as a bloc has to contribute to the world and to address the challenges that the world faces today. And I think we should be cognizant of that. We should not, because I sometimes feel that BRICS still treats itself more as a sort of marginal player than as a central player in the world affairs. Because I think that's what the BRIC leaders must recognize, that they have the resources to be able to contribute more than what, let's say, some certain, more stable powers, etc., could do. So that's now to the second point, which is that what are these opportunities that I'm talking about? And the first one I must begin with, and I hope it's not so controversial because I think it's is that you are seeing today the decline of the world order that we inherited from the Second World War. That's clear. It's amply clear. And in that, you have what you see today, well, unfortunately, is that Pax Americana rules no longer. I mean, the world is not being ruled by a hegemonic American power. That sets the rules and so on. America is once more showing its tendency to go back into its shell between the two ponds and isolationism, etc., and lost the appetite for running the world in in any sort of rule-based order, etc. So that's a very big thing because what will replace this? What will replace Pax Americana? And I think that's something that BRICS is a very natural block if we can get to it because that can replace it. And therefore, as both Sanjay and Michael said, that the necessity of a rule-based multilateral order in this world, rule-based and not a personal whims-based order, who will bring this about? And I think that's the biggest challenge that BRICS can actually address itself to. That's the first one. The second one is on the opportunity is that there are enough number of global public goods which are today being left unaddressed by all of or everybody, the global public goods. And there are some, for example, climate change. The UN, the UN FCCA tells us that today we have not longer than a 20-year window to actually, address climate change and prevent catastrophe from happening. Now that's a global public good. No one country can handle it on its own, and therefore BRICS has all the member countries plus there is influence to be able to do so. Climate change is one, and we must the more we highlight, the more BRICS highlight this, the better off. The second one is the moral and ethical aspects of artificial intelligence. Where will we stop? How will we take care of it? Remember, the world agreed when Dolly the sheep was cloned that no more, and this cloning, the human cloning, will stop. We have to come to a similar agreement in AI. Where will AI stop? What are the limits? What are the moral and ethical limits of AI? The second public good. The third is, we have to accept. I know that Africa is a rising continent, but overall, we are faced now with the aging society, even in this country, and in China, and in Europe, Japan, etc. What are the requirements? What are the public health requirements? What are the societal requirements for making this society a society which is, which cares, which looks after its aging society and not just be. So that's the third public good that I thought. Fourth, of course, is fintech. Fintech is changing the entire contours of global financial system because now fintech maybe with cryptos, maybe with CBDC, etc. You don't need any of the intermediaries where you now that you had in the past. So the role of the banks will change, the role of capital markets will change. Who will look after them? How will that come about? Is the fourth sort of public good that we're talking. And the last one that I would of course mention is the non-state actors. You have to somewhere come to a consensus to bring about understanding as to how non-state actors should not and may not be able to influence world world order or what's happening in the world. So I'm just saying that starting with the decline of Pax Americana and a vacuum that is left on the global stage, the end, the sort of what Thomas Friedman said, the earth not being flat any longer but full of crevices and precipices, etc. Who will replace this? How will all the system, the geo-economic organization that we inherited after the Second World War, how will they be re-catered, redesigned to meet the 21st century requirement? That's the big one. And then you've got all these, global public goods, both negative and positive that you have to take care of. So I think, therefore, BRICS has the resources and BRICS has the opportunity, massive opportunity to play a role. Now, the third, therefore, it becomes very important that whether BRICS will be able to do it, how will BRICS be able to do it? And may I start off by saying that the time has come, and I think people mentioned that You mentioned that Pakistan should be congratulated to bring about whatever they have brought about. Could BRICS have been doing the same thing? I mean, after all, there are members, and BRICS could the voice of the BRICS have been raised? Could so what that requires is a much larger degree of coherence within the BRICS. And I think that coherence, how will we bring that about, I think is an important issue because there's not been discussed so far. And to that extent, I think what probably might be the best way forward is to finally establish a secretariat of the BRICS, which has not been done. It's been discussed very often. And I know that, it's at the moment it's just, the troika that kind of, takes on with it, which as in G20. But I think BRICS secret, if the new development bank can exist and the infrastructure bank can exist, so can there be a secretariat which is populated by BRIC member countries, because that secretariat enables a conversation among BRIC member countries, which could lead to a greater coherence, if you like, and that's what I think is the first thing that we need to talk about. Uh, and why is there a hesitation in doing so is something that we need to discuss and much greater and with much greater candidness today at this point of time. The second one, of course, is that we must recognize, with all due respect to Russia at the moment, is that India and China are the two emerging sort of powers that is in the 21st century, and the two have to work together on a degree of understanding to bring about any coherence within the BRICS. And then once these two come to some understanding, the others may find it easier to follow and join in, as it were. Now, how will that happen? What is How will that happen is, I think, a large extent, of course, dependent on the two countries' leaderships. But I think even more so, being an Indian, may I hazard the statement that it probably depends much more on India than on China at the moment. Because if India takes the lead in this regard, we can probably bring this bilateral agreement, which is actually required to do so. Friends, just to end by the fact that uh, BRICS needn't be on the margins of global affairs and global relations. It can become the mainstream. If the Board of Peace is being suggested, I think it's far less viable than the BRICS themselves. But to be able to do that, uh, the last bit is, you see, there are three types of relationship that you have: a G to G, a B to B, and a P to P, a people to people. BRICS has remained confined to a G to G situation. And I think what we need to do is to develop much more the B2B and the P2P. And some mechanisms, if they're established for that, I think it will contribute to the strengthening of the BRICS. And once that is done, BRICS can then contribute to the emergence of a new global world order, which is in sync with the 21st century realities and doesn't go back to the mid 20th century from where the current world order emanates from. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I will have some questions for the panelists. What do we do? I mean, we have talked of multilateral forums like BRICS, very important. But what to do when one major superpower is still perhaps the biggest force, does not believe in any multilateralism? World Trade Organization, it was supposed to discuss with multilateral trade. America bilaterally, I mean, totally unilaterally rather, goes on, I mean, tariff this country this much, this country this much, this country this much, and changing it overnight. What do we do? What do we do with the law of seas when Gulf of Mexico is all of a sudden named as Gulf of America? What do you do when they are least bothered about climate change and drill baby drill is happening? So how do we talk of multilateralism when even UN is relegated to irrelevance, as we have seen in the West Asian conflict? So these are the things, and where would BRIC stand when the established multilateral institutions are not being taken care of? I mean, any one of us panelists can reply. Should I start with Sanjay, please?
Thank you. Um, I think this idea of multilateralism being in coma often leads sides to believe that they can create a new order which is totally bereft of the old order. Um, and in some ways, the emergence of the G7, which became G8 for a period of time, was to see because their needs were not being met by the multilateral process as well, quite apart from what the developing countries felt. Um, the idea of BRICS was on the other edge. And, BRICS and G20 came up around the same time. And I sometimes see the G20 as proxy multilateralism, which is like a bridge between the old multilateralism and the new forms that are emerging, which are more plurilateral or minilateral in sustenance. I think the old order will stay in coma for some more time, but we should not give up hope because they have actually served the global community extremely well on both the fronts that they were supposed to, which was for growth and development on the one hand and for peace and security on the other. Today, they are probably short on that. So we need to keep working. And I think what we need is to work on the narratives which suggest that G7 is anti-developing countries or that BRICS is anti-West. And the moment we start doing that and pushing those alternative narratives, we will probably find something that is better for all sides. I think also one more point is that when things are way out of the moral sink and the ethical order, it needs to be called out. Just because a certain power or a certain country or a certain individual seems to be dominant is not sufficient reason for the rest of the world to say that you are wrong.
Yeah, thanks. I think a great question, and the only possible answer is to well to outshout, if you like. I mean, I mean, and and tell the emperor what he's wearing. Because that's what needs to be done, and therefore you need to have the courage and also the organization to be able to do so. Which is why I was suggesting a sort of a secretariat for the BRICS. But if you had that, for example, at the moment, and a statement coming out of there, would be a huge, narrative changer, for the world. Because after all, taking the world back to, 19th century imperialism, and saying that they can do what you want to do because it suits your, individual or your country's interest is not acceptable in the 21st century, or should not. But the point is that there is no counterweight, there is no counterpoise to that. Who will provide that counterpoise? I'm so afraid G7 cannot, NATO cannot, G20 also will not because of what the G20 is. So therefore, BRICS has that potential, but but BRICS would need to have that courage and understanding to be able to play that role.
Mikhail?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. A great question for sure. As I see it, as we navigate these turbulent times and as we see countries deciding to act as they want and not follow the system that has been working pretty much well for the last 70 years, we should focus on strengthening resilience of our countries. We should push forward practical solutions and find out the best pathways for resilient and sustainable development. So that's why we are pushing forward the practical mechanisms. Like I said, the cross-border payment initiative, the reinsurance company, new investment platform. All these are uh, designed to provide the necessary impetus for economy and provide resilience for external shocks and provide an opportunity to move in our all-weather cooperation. Yeah.
Another very quick question, and I would like very quick replies. Global realignment amidst West Asian crisis.
it seems that the West has slightly, I mean, the allies, American allies, are no more siding with US in uh, in bombing or allowing their bases to bomb Iran. Is some global realignment happening? On the other hand, I mean, it's something like Sherlock Holmes. The dog didn't bark. USSR and China relatively silent during the entire crisis. What does it mean overall? The some realignment happening. What exactly is happening?
I think it's a temporary sort of real, if you like, because the NATO countries, which is what really we're talking about. I mean, I think is it Article 5 that say that if one is involved, then all of them involved. That clearly is now in breach.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
because of this war, and I think very conscious decision by the European partners to not participate in what's happening at the moment. So, but I suppose it'll revert back, after maybe after 24. This is exactly what I was saying. Maybe after 24. But on the other hand, it may not, because it might, who knows who succeed Trump's. I mean, his vice his vice president doesn't inspire too much confidence. So I think to that extent there could be a real, and the realignment, again, my view would be that the BRICS represent the best form of realignment. If these countries come together in a coherent manner, then they can influence the world order or the world, narrative, going forward, rather than the transatlantic countries doing that, which they've done for the last 70 years.
Um, if I may just add to that, I feel that this particular war was most unfortunate. And the pushback that you saw from some of the Western countries who are traditional allies of the United States was what I call as the first stage of a pushback, but not an opposition, not really calling out in those very clear, explicit terms. And so I would agree that this is probably a temporary thing, but it also harks back to the question that you had mentioned in your opening remarks about the need for morality and ethics, and we need to have that compass come back on existence. I find that within the BRICS community, which is very fortunately consensus driven and therefore often consultations and discussions are important, the idea of having convergence on such political issues in which sometimes members themselves may be involved has not been easy. And it will not be easy even in the future. But I think the fact that they have discussions and bring about certain forms of consensus, not solving the problem, but having some consultations is very important. And so the inability of BRICS, I would say, is not an inability of BRICS itself, but of the global system in dealing with these differing and emerging issues.
Mikhail?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Sure. And well, as for realignment, does it really happen? For sure, the West Asia crisis has a catastrophic impact. But from a broader perspective, it's another instance of a much broader trend. Let's look at just this year's alone. For over the 3 months that we saw the military intervention in Venezuela, the abduction of legitimate President Maduro, the escalation of tensions around Cuba, now Iran. And it's just this year. This year is not unprecedented, I would say. So the major trend is destabilization and a transition to a new reality. This West Asia crisis exposed the vulnerability of the existing system, and it pushes us forward to uh, next moves and gives maybe another impetus to promote a multipolar world order. a system that would provide us with opportunities to live in a sustainable and stable world. That's
Can I take some few questions? Please. Yeah.
Good afternoon to the panelists.
Just small introduction of yourself, one line.
No, that is coming to the question. So my question is to. Oh, sorry. Uh, Good afternoon to the panelists. My name is Hoimontik Gugoi, and I'm a postgraduate student from Mahe Manipal. So my question is to Professor Sanjeev Bhattacharya, sir. Sir, as the member of the BRICS 2026, India is now holding a expanded 11 member bloc. Yet the internal differences between the nations have not led to a collective condemnation of the hostilities in the current West Asian crisis, with the members like the Iran and UAE having contradictory security alignment. Sorry. So the given the current West Asia crisis, which threatens the maritime logistical integrity, and how does India plan to use this BRICS forum? Like, how is the mood of India to frame a conflict resilient or energy digital security framework like it did in the G20 declaration, sir? How? Thank you.
Big question.
So my question is related to that. I'm just saying that meeting at this time, immediately in the midst of war or slightly peace winds blowing in. I mean, I think BRICS is the most fractured organization at this point in time. Four of its countries are at war with each other, or a virtual war with each other, which is Israel with UAE, Israel with Saudi Arabia. Oh, sorry, Iran with the UAE, Iran with Saudi Arabia, etc. And some of the countries like India is probably, in terms of supply chains, etc., is most badly integrated in its immediate neighborhood. Russia is badly integrated, at least vis-a-vis Ukraine. Brazil may be a great country, but it never did anything when Venezuelan crisis happened, which was unfolding for last 12 years. So if they don't have their immediate neighborhoods put in order and integrated, some of the best examples of regional integration are probably Southeast Asia and maybe Central Asia, etc., or even West Asia till before this crisis happened. So unless you put your own houses and your own neighborhoods in order, how do you decide to get that audacity to start addressing global issues?
Sanjay, would you like to reply?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me get to this very quickly. Yeah. Um, the first one was about the expansion of BRICS and the fact, so what kind of role can we have, and we didn't condemn. In real world, things are not so black and white. And therefore, while condemnation seems to be a very easy thing to come out in a seminar or in a room like this, in the real world, it's a slightly more complicated process. Let us say that in this particular instance, when it happened, there were two BRICS nations that actually condemned the war. And we congratulate them for it. There were several others that actually called for a de-escalation process through diplomatic means and negotiation. And India was one of those, which is standard conflict resolution strategy. And I think you have to recognize that at the end of the day, calling out a war and saying that you need to de-escalate is equally important as condemning it, because at the end of the day, you want a solution. So I think BRICS did something. I did mention that the BRICS Sherpas and the national security advisors did have consultations among themselves. It's not always necessary to have a public statement because things are sometimes a little more complicated. The second one was about supply chains and integration, and I do take that point because while regional integration is extremely important and we all wish to work towards that,
we also must recognize that today's world is far more globalized. And although we do see disruptions in supply chains, we see breakages in sea lanes, we see economic sanctions, technology denial regimes, and there are other kinds of political sanctions as well. We do try and work towards greater globalization. And the effort of all this, particularly in terms of organizations, groupings of emerging economies, is to bring about that particular sense. And I think, as Mikhail said, it's resilience. We understand crises will happen, but we will not bend down and succumb to it, but we will find the ability to come back, and so that we'll have a more resilient structure.
Yeah, can I please contribute? Um, uh, to both questions, a general idea. BRICS is not a block. It's not intended to be block. It's not designed to be block, and it does not foster any collective discipline, unlike other groupings, other organizations. It's a platform that provides an opportunity for countries to discuss, to develop maybe a way which will be sustainable. It's a rocky road. We do have some differences from time to time, but in the long run, we are aimed at a consensus. So that's why, yeah, uh, as Professor Bhattacharya said, probably a joint statement is an important thing, but to reach a consensus is far more important. We are on our way to a multipolar world, so we have to find ways how to deal with each other, how to understand each other here and respect each other's position. That's my idea.
One more question, please.
Just a small point. Sorry.
Thank you. Am I audible? Okay. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Viktor Erdész. I'm the Defense Attaché of Hungary. It was really interesting to hear everything so far. I would like to have a question to Professor Sanjay. You made a small reference on a possible BRICS role in Eastern Europe. I would assume you meant Ukraine. Could you please elaborate on this in a bit of details and your ideas regarding this? And of course, it would be interesting to hear Mr. Mihail's views on that too. Thank you.
Otherwise, that this NATO fissure appears to be temporary, or do you think it is permanent? And when Islamic Quad is coming, the people are saying like that. They want to come to Calcutta to join India again. But then they want to suggest the Islamic Quad is coming. 4 powers Islamic Quad with a nuclear weapon state is going to lead that Quad. Will it have any impact on BRICS?
Let me first make a point about, thank you for raising that issue about the conflict hotspot in Europe. I was elaborating 4 different conflict hotspots, one of which is in Europe. It's not that BRICS is involved or seeking to mediate or bring, resolve that particular issue. I think, as is quite evident, these are issues that need to be resolved amongst the parties concerned. Others can be helpful. BRICS does discuss this particular aspect very intensely in its discussions, quite aware that one of the members is also, in a sense, involved in that particular situation. And in some ways, while that deeply enriches our understanding, it also poses and informs us about the complexity of the issue. And so I'm not saying, and BRICS has never sought a role in that particular issue. About the Islamic Quad, I'm actually a little surprised about this particular development because I've not seen any credible information that seems to suggest that this is indeed the case. The kind of differences that exist between many of these parties is quite well known. And if they do come about to form such an alliance, we would wish to see what those contours are, because even in terms of strategic or mutual support kind of alliances, the questions that are there, given their current priorities, and I'm talking essentially, if you look at what is often mentioned about Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, the kind of differences that are there are so evident that I don't see this really being a reality. But I would wish to add another point. I think to try and link this to the nuclear issue is an extremely dangerous project. We've seen the dangers of, and I think Mikhail, you mentioned about it as well, about the munitions being dropped in nuclear sites during this current conflict in Iran. We've had two instances. I've served in Japan, so I know what it means. We've had two instances where this has happened on civilian populations, and we don't wish to see this happen ever again. So nations need to exercise the responsibility that is expected of them in this particular context.
Yeah. As for Ukraine, do the Russian side do value any uh, action, any ideas, any initiatives aimed at finding a sustainable solution to the conflict, including those taken by BRICS members, China, Brazil? Yeah, we have outlined our position in this regard on several occasions. And the main idea here is to address the root cause of the conflict. So that we are looking into any initiative that could address this particular issue.
Uh, Thanks all participants. On a very optimistic note, that BRICS will continue to play and will play a further important role, a very constructive multilateral role in the times to come. And they are yet, I mean, it's a new body. It's not a very old body, not even 2 decades, so to say. So it will continue to play and it will gain more maturity. It will do even more, even better in the years to come. Thank you once again, Professor Kumar, Professor Bhattacharya, and First Secretary Mikhail. Thank you.
Well, that was indeed a very, very insightful, interesting session. We all agree that the BRICS bloc will play an extremely important role in the future, in the years to come. Thank you all very much. Before we wind up, I would like to hand over a small memento as a token of gratitude. Gautam Purohit, our senior editor, please, can you do the honors, please? Let's start with Dr. Jain Singh, who has always been supporting us. Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, thank you very much, sir, for accepting this invitation. Thank you very much for your insights. Professor Bhattacharya, thank you very, very much. Well, I'll never forget what you said. BRICS is still in its Gen Z mode. So there's a lot to work on. Thank you very much for your insight. And Mr. Ponster, thank you again for joining us. Thank you very much. We shall take a small break, about 15 to 20 minutes for tea, coffee. I'm sure we all need that. And we will join back exactly in around 20 minutes. Thank you. May I request you to take your seats, please? We can start with our second session. Well, we can get our chai, coffee, whatever we are having, we can get it here. We now move into our second session, and I must say, we've had a truly insightful, interesting morning. And I can assure you that the second session is going to be as stimulating. Our focus now shifts to assessing the role of BRICS and the roadmap ahead. In today's increasingly unpredictable global environment, the norms of multilateral cooperation are being rechalked, are being redefined. In this evolving landscape, the role of BRICS, the role of BRICS bloc, the global south will be significant and consequential. For BRICS to play a more effective and a more crucial role in shaping the world order, it must evolve greater clarity. It must evolve cohesion and it must work with purpose. This is precisely what we aim to explore in this session. We are joined by a highly distinguished and experienced panel to discuss this issue, the future of BRICS. Let me introduce my panelists. Dr. Dhanuraj, Dr. D. Dhanuraj, Chairman, Center for Public Policy Research. Mr. Haitham Elashmawy, First Secretary, Embassy of Egypt. Mr. Peter Mahafha, First Secretary, Embassy of South Africa, and Professor Aravind Yelery. He's teaching in JNU. He's taught at Peking University. He's a China expert. A quick outline before we start our session. I would request our panelists to share their opening remarks, opening comments in 5 to 7 minutes. This can be followed with a discussion. And before we wind up, we'll definitely open it up for audience question and answer. With that, let us begin. Dhanuraj, if I may request you to start the presentation or your initial comments. If you want, you can sit.
Thank you so much. Uh, very good afternoon to all of you, and thanks for this invitation from the Secretariat, Mahua, and all other colleagues and friends. Uh, you know, when I received this invitation to speak today, the world was different. When I was preparing for this discussion, is going through uh, tectonic changes, I would say, globally. And yesterday I was again preparing. Things were different. In the morning, I got a shock. Okay, again, things got changed. So it looks like we are playing 5-day test match or T20 match, what you want to watch at the end of the day, or you want to shape it to a T10 match. Now people are envisaging. I'm going to present my views based on some of our recent research publications that we published on BRICS and India's presidency. I was a co-author to a couple of papers recently, but this was written and published 2 months back. So I tried to incorporate some of the latest developments into the present world, I mean, today's discussion. Uh, as we discussed in the first half, BRICS, 15, 16 years of existence, and this year is very important for all of us because India is chairing it. And I was part of the G20 discussions when India hosted G20 dialogues. And I was told by many that time, now next is BRICS. India is chairing BRICS, and probably we will see kind of G20 discussions around the country. For various reasons, I could understand we are not yet taken off, right? We are silent, we are observing, we are watching, and there could be many reasons for that. So to give a brief of, before we discussing what is BRICS future, we should also understand what BRICS stands today and what are the opportunities and challenges we have. We've heard a lot on political side of the argument today morning. I'm not getting to that. That will be repetitive. But other than that, what all things BRICS could offer. So BRICS with the expansion now with 11 members. One of the challenges let's look from the geopolitical reconfiguration from a counterweight to platform to start with. The logic of expansion, as we discussed in the morning, it was to understand, it was here to help to form a platform where an alternative thinking and alternative positioning in the geopolitical order could be positioned. From 5-member to 11-member body today, I think it has a lot to offer. But at the same time, it also raises so many challenges internally. I think every member has got, I think the reality is totally different outside, right? From a textbook, we can say a lot, but the reality outside is totally different. For the reason that, for example, in this conflict, the present day conflict that we see, some of the BRIC members are actually on the opposite poles, right? So how are we going to build that consensus? That's a reality question that we are all facing. And a country like India, how India is positioning in this conflict or in this emerging world would be another interesting debate. So we talked about non-alignment, I think, in the morning. So the membership drive was to strengthen the non-alignment posture and deepen economic ties with countries like China, which will upgrade their bilateral relationship to an all-weather strategic cooperation partnership. This was the September 24 statement from the BRICS grouping. And one of the challenges that I think, since this is a closed door meeting, would be BRICS has also been accused for sometimes. BRICS serves as a safe haven or life raft function for member states facing temporary geopolitical challenges. We have occasions where, we were inviting, or BRICS was okay accommodating all member countries to come and sit on a platform where many other multilaterals were not ready to accept the presence of many of these countries. So sometimes looking from outside, they say that this platform is actually too accommodative instead of taking a position on certain geopolitical development, right? I hope you understand. Then multipolarity and global south. We have the 17th, this is 18th, this year India is hosting 18th BRICS Summit. The 17th BRICS Summit in Rio, in their joint declaration, the title of the joint declaration was Strengthening Global South Cooperation for More Inclusive and Sustainable Governance, committed to defend international law and strive for a more equitable global order. This was the last statement. Now 18th, we are waiting sometime later this year. When I read out strengthening global South cooperation for more inclusive and sustainable governance, committing to defend international law, reflect on that, and strive for a more more equitable global order. What all things happened in the last few months we know, and what was the position taken by BRICS. And I'm sure this is also probably the reason we as host nation, now the chair, we are redefining BRICS in a totally different way. EM has, Mr. Jaishankar has defined or tried to give a different postulate to BRICS expansion. Again, the 2025 summit, the lot of talk about the global banking, the financial, the NDB here, part of the BRICS group. It's also some analysts at the time has remarked that it's a strategic multi-alignment for increasingly navigating between major powers than committing to a single block. This is about the financial part. The BRICS frameworks provides a diplomatic space for this navigation, distinct from the binary Cold War alignment model. And this strategic flexibility is particularly attractive to middle powers, such as Indonesia, India, Brazil, which seek to maintain a productive relationship with both the United States and China while preserving their policy autonomy. So this is the reality. While we are trying to have our policy autonomy and also to have a very robust relationship with countries around the world today, especially a country like India, how BRICS platform can be utilized or could be exploited, if I could use the term, is a question for many members of this bloc. This is not going to be easy. Now, coming to the alternative financial architecture reform and whether we are expecting reform or a revolution with the BRICS bloc from the point of financial architecture. We talked about, I think in the morning, we talked about de-dollarization. I also believe that de-dollarization is not the idea here. But there's also, some groups have already did an assessment of what is the kind of funding that New Development Bank has approved from 2023 onwards. And interestingly, we could see that 30% of the money that was of 30 billion US dollars, 30% was dispersed in non-dollar currency by NDB. And this is also a term called now BRICSization, dollarization versus BRICSization. And there's an index. I'm sure some of you might have come across this index where 73% of BRICS members have achieved something like a de-dollarization, even though it is not a stated objective, 73%. And out of that, 93% is achieved by Brazil, China, and South Africa, right? So even though it is not a stated objective, it has been happening. And now what future stakes for the BRICS in terms of de-dollarization, that's something that we need to wait and watch. But at the same time, the problem with the financial institution, something like one institution like NDB would be, there's also a concern about are we also replicate what IMF and World Bank are doing? It's called a replicative institutionalization, right? Because the whole idea of NDB was different, but when you assess NDB's performance and how they operate, looks like they're also falling into the same line of what Bretton Woods organizations were doing. And also whether they are serving certain dominant groups within the group, because that was not the idea. Second, whether they are looking for any genuine structural transformation. That's another debate. Then there are new perspective members, and also the NDB is also beyond these 11 members. There are other members, parties actually wanted to use NDB. And the question here is the new members or the new prospective members deepen their engagement, and whether NDB is in a position to continue raising funds in multiple currencies despite geopolitical volatility, because this is a larger context of the geopolitical order now. My issue when I look at the de-dollarization, I'm not advocating, or I'm not the realistic, because we last few weeks actually, what we found was the gold price was falling, and I don't see any expert across the markets have foreseen that. That tells you something. And I was checking now. I don't know last few hours what happened, but gone up 4%. That shows a dollar. People still, we talk a lot about in these conferences, but the market is still trusting dollar compared to any other currency, right? So and also the different monetary policies, different economies, different sizes, different debt management of all these member countries is not easy to have somebody ask this question of block. First of all, it's not a geographic bloc like European Union or Southeast Asia. These are all distinct countries located in different parts of the world. And why should give an example, why should India's debt is managed by some other country when bringing a uniform or common currency? I'm not talking about BRICS currency, that's also not going to happen. But in terms of a current understanding. Then international coordination, structural changes. There the problem is, like I said in the beginning, members also have different interests, different outlooks on various geopolitical challenges, and how are we going to build a consensus around that? So there's a deficit among the coordinating governments, and BRICS is also a body or a platform where there's no binding factor. These are voluntary commitments, and how can we ensure compliance, and how can we ensure regulations, and that looks like sometimes it is fundamentally toothless, whether we like it or not, as a group. Then roadmap ahead. I think India is looking for. I believe our motto or the focus will be the humanity first argument. Right, that's what we've been advocating for so many years now, and this is going to be a Herculean task for Indian diplomacy this year. How we are going to navigate in these difficult times, and just to give, I'll take 1 or 2 minutes more. Don't forget, who is the next president of BRICS? China. China will take off from India next year. So there'll be a lot of interesting developments in that transition time. I'm sure not only in the BRICS platform, but across the world, in the emerging, the heft that probably China is going to enjoy in the coming years. Just cut short this is a paper that, before that I wrote. We were discussing what all areas India should focus on. So something like digital public infrastructure, climate and clean energy transitions, reforms in multilateral institutions, then the funding for infrastructure, climate-related projects. So probably these are, you will have more bias, right? So I'll stop here. We'll take more questions in the ground. Thank you.
Whichever is comfortable for you.
Okay, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'm just trying to give you an idea why Egypt joined the BRICS and how we see its future. So Egypt joined the BRICS in January 2024 with a conviction that a multipolar world requires voices from the global south, viewing this step not as a shift away from any partner, but as a strategic affirmation of our commitment to a more equitable, multipolar, and inclusive world order. In light of the conflict in West Asia, we face serious challenges, including energy insecurity, supply chain disruption, trade wars, and currency volatility. These pressures have hit developing countries particularly hard, including Egypt as a key trade corridor via Suez Canal. The ongoing conflict in West Asia has exposed the fragility of the current global economic architecture. We have witnessed severe disruptions to energy markets, heightened currency volatility, renewed supply chain fragmentation, and the weaponization of sanctions and trade restrictions. These challenges do not affect only the immediate region. They ripple across the global south, threatening food security, inflation control, and development gains. Egypt, as a major importer of energy and grain and a critical node in global trade through the Suez Canal, feels this pressure acutely. The conflict has underscored the urgent need for diversified energy security and resilient supply chains. BRICS countries, with their vast resources and complementary economies, are uniquely positioned to offer practical solutions, including increased intra-BRICS trade in local currencies, and reconstruction in West Asia. We are living through a period of weakening traditional multilateral institutions. Global governance structures established after the Second World War no longer fully reflect today's economic and demographic realities. BRICS, now representing approximately 40% of the global population and over 35% of global GDP, has emerged as a vital platform for the global south. Can BRICS act as a stabilizing force? Absolutely yes, but not by replacing existing institutions. Rather, by reforming them and complementing them, Egypt supports a BRICS that strengthen multilateralism with equity, one that amplifies the voice of developing nations in the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO. Our collective weight as BRICS gives us the moral and economic authority to push for fairer representations, debt sustainability, and climate finance that matches the scales of our challenges. As an African and Arab nation, Egypt sees BRICS as a bridge. We bring to the table our strategic location, our experience in mediation, and our deep ties with both the African continent and the broader global south. In a fragmenting world, BRICS can serve as an anchor of stability through pragmatic cooperation rather than ideological confrontation. We warmly welcome India's presidency of BRICS in 2026. India has consistently championed the aspiration of Global South, and we are confident that New Delhi will articulate a cohesive agenda that addresses our shared priorities, sustainable development, digital inclusion, and reform global governance. For Egypt, India's leadership presents clear opportunities. We look forward to deepen cooperation in infrastructure, financing, digital economy, and food security. India's success in balancing strategic autonomy with constructive global engagement offers valuable lessons. Egypt too is committed to the same balance, maintaining our independent foreign policy while exercising collective leadership within BRICS. Let us work together under India's able presidency to turn challenges into opportunity and build the BRICS that deliver tangible benefits for our peoples. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elashmawy. May I now request Mr. Mahafha to make his statement, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Program Director. Thank you all the people who are here, and also thank the organizers for inviting us, the mission of South Africa, to be part of this debate that we're debating today. First and foremost, before I can start with what I'm going to elaborate on, I just want to say I concur with what was said by Dr. Kuma when he said that no, there is a need for BRICS to have its own secretariat. If the OECD can make it with their own secretariat, so with the why not with where's the BRICS? We are not imitating, but we have to do it, having the so-called the BRICS secretariat. The initiative that was taken, that has been taken by India to have the so-called the Raisina dialogue, I think it's a good initiative, wherein people from across the globe, they come together to discuss the challenges that we are faced with. And out of it, we come up with the solution. So that was that. Now I have to switch on to what I'm called for. Firstly, it is an honor and privilege to reflect today and the involving role, to reflect today on the involving role of BRICS within the international system, and to consider the roadmap ahead of the important grouping, which is BRICS. Since its inception, BRICS has evolved beyond an economic acronym into a strategic platform for cooperation among major emerging economies. Collectively, its members represent nearly half of the world population. It has been said previously, and I repeated it and repeated just because it is a fact. It's true. And then it represents nearly half of the world population. A significant share of the global GDP and an increasing influential voice in the global governance. The relevance of BRICS must therefore be assessed not in terms of past achievement, but also in relation to what it is called upon to become in a rapidly changing global environment. At the same at a time when multilateralism is under threat, uh, this I concur with what was said by my colleague from Egypt that he believes that India, although India's presidency, like with the question of the AU, they believe that this will bring many opportunities to the world. We will benefit out of the India's presidency. We have a trust and believe that India will make it as previously did it. So now my focus, I'm changing the focus now. I have to look into just because I have to look into the role and the roadmap ahead. Under the role, I identified the three key areas, which is economic counterbalance. And then under this, to substantiate this one, I indicated that through institutions like the NDB and the contingent reserve arrangement, BRICS provides alternative financing and development pathways, reducing reliance on the Western dominance institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank. These mechanisms are particularly significant for developing countries seeking access to infrastructure, finance, climate finance funding, and greater policy space to pursue inclusive and sustainable growth. Point number two, BRICS, it has been said previously, and I'll repeat it again. BRICS also serve as the voice of the global south. Under this, BRICS has become a platform for emerging economies to articulate concern about inequality in trade, finance, and climate negotiation. It embodies the aspiration of nations seeking a fairer, multipolar world order. Through this collective engagement, BRICS has contributed to rebalancing global discourse and challenging outdated power asymmetries within international decision-making structures. For South Africa, BRICS provides an important platform to advance calls to reform institutions such as the UNSC, IMF, and the World Bank, while promoting a fairer representation of African and broader global South interests. Lastly, under the so-called the role, I identify the so-called the global influence. BRICS as a global influence, by challenging the dominance of a single bloc, BRICS promote multipolarity. It is merely about turning against the West. It is not. It is not merely about turning against the West, but about creating space for diverse voices in global governance. Despite differences in geography, political system, and national interest priorities, BRICS has demonstrated that pragmatic cooperation is possible when anchored in mutual respect, sovereign equality, and the principle of non-interference. This is in itself sends a powerful message into this increasingly polarized international environment where dialogue and consensus are often under strain. And then under the roadmap, looking under the roadmap ahead. I'm sorry, man. Sometimes when I speak, yeah. Looking ahead, the future relevance of BRICS will depend on strategic focus, institutional consolidation, and inclusive leadership. Allow me to highlight several priorities that should guide the roadmap ahead. Yes, we are achieving, but no, well, we still need to do more. Just because challenges are galore. And then, firstly, deepening economic and development cooperation. BRICS must move beyond dialogue towards measurable and impactful outcomes. Strengthening trade facilitation among members, enhancing investment flows, and expanding the use of local currencies where feasible will help build economic resilience. In this context, South Africa looks forward to attracting increased investment from BRICS partners, particularly in manufacturing, digital technologies, and green energy. Expansion and point number two is expansion and inclusivity. With new members from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, BRICS is evolving into BRICS Plus, a coalition that reflects the global majority. This inclusivity strengthens its legitimacy and bargaining power. While it Its past achievements have firmly established its credibility. Its future relevance will be defined by its ability to adapt, lead, and deliver concrete results in an increasingly complex global environment. Point number 3, I think this one is about India and China. Digital and technological cooperation. For from artificial intelligence to fintech, BRICS nations are investing in shared innovation. India's emphasis on digital public infrastructure and China's focus on technology transfer highlight the bloc's potential lead in the digital stage. The future of development is undeniable digital. Enhanced cooperation in science, technology, artificial intelligence, and skills development will be essential to ensure that emerging economies are not merely consumers of innovation, but active producers and shapers of global norms and standards. Point number 4, sustainability and climate action. BRICS is aligning with global climate goals, funding renewable energy projects, and promoting transitions. This is not only an economic necessary, but a moral imperative. Point number 5, people-to-people connectivity. Beyond economic and geopolitics, BRICS must deepen cultural, educational, knowledge sharing exchanges to foster mutual trust and solidarity. Point number 5, advancing the development and global South agenda. BRICS should position itself as a leader in advancing the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, SDG goals. This includes supporting poverty reduction, food security, strengthening health system, and capacity building initiatives in developing countries, especially in Africa and other least developed regions or nations. However, as I spoke about the achievement, but this does not go without challenges. Okay, under challenges, of course, the road ahead is not without obstacles. There is a need of institutional capacity must be strengthened to manage expansion and avoid fragmentation. That is what was said by Dr. Kuma about BRICS Secretariat. External pressures from sanctions to strategic competition may test to block's resilience. As I heard some, they said they avoided using the word block and then use the BRICS platform, whatever. So that I will learn for future, I will use the word platform. But therefore, in conclusion, I will say BRICS is no longer a footnote in global affairs, but a headline. Its role is to serve as a bridge, not as a barrier, a platform to reform, not confrontation. The roadmap ahead must be guided by inclusivity, innovation, sustainability, and solidarity. As the world faces turbulence, geographical rivals, economic inequality, and ecological crisis, BRICS offers a vision of cooperation rooted in equality and mutual trust. The task before us is to ensure that this vision translates into action so that the future of global governance is not defined by division but by dialogue. Let us therefore commit to a BRICS that is not just a coalition of states, but a coalition of aspiration, a coalition that builds fairer, multipolar, and sustainable world order. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahafha. Professor Yelery, if you could make your comments, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, the Secretariat and Mahuma, for inviting me. And this is seriously a pleasure to be in front of you and just share my ideas on the BRICS. Uh, things have definitely changed, as the first panelist said. Uh, things have become so much challenging in past several decades. So my idea is in next 5 to 7 minutes is to just focus on those challenges which BRICS has been facing. Let me start with expansion, because expansion has become a buzzword for BRICS. And a couple of BRICS forum I've been part of an expansion has been taken too seriously by the Chinese first and then the Russians. So expansion, why expansion? Why expansion now? I think let's connect the expansion with the larger narrative over here. Inclusivity is fine, but inclusivity, when you define through the standard of expansion, that should be applied to all the expansions, whether that is a UN expansion, energy expansions, and expansions of all sorts. But it looks like the expansion comes with its own complexities. And I have a problem with expansion, not the idea of expansion, but the manner in which the BRICS has been coerced or been told to expand. Because this is not an Indian voice. If you go and talk to Brazilians already feel that they were part of an executive club called BRICS, and now the BRICS has expanded. They feel that they have lost that exclusivity. This is not Indian opinion, but within BRICS there is a rising opinion that expansion should have gotten something to the BRICS. Definitely, the responsibility has increased, or accountability has increased on parts of BRICS. But how we're going to balance the accountability with responsibility? Because you would see that BRICS, when it came into existence, it came into existence with a lot of heterogeneous ideas. Start with Mr. Kamath to present to Dilma Rousseff. They have been talking about heterogeneous, but heterogeneous becomes a challenge when you have this group where uh, there are energy exporters also and importers also in this group. There are countries which are sanction hit. There are also countries which are sanction sensitive economies. There are democracies, there are authoritarian states also. And as well as there are China centric and China valley members. So, I mean, you forget about United Nations, you forget about WTO. This is the newest, youngest, multilateral forum. You will see that it talks about, it celebrates about heterogeneity, but that celebration has a lot of anxieties hidden within. Then you have the major problem with expansion is it brings in lot legitimacy. So expansion is bringing legitimacy to the group as a whole, or expansion is bringing legitimacy to certain groups, and that has to be taken into account. The major problem with the expansion is that it is going to make consensus slower. Let's agree with this. We celebrate often, but I think we need to also be little cautious that if we want to make BRICS little slower, little less sharper, or more reactive and dynamic. Because while BRICS is countering major problems with institutionalizing or creating its own architecture, creating its own standards as far as conflict management is concerned, we are bringing a lot more on the table while the other problems had not been solved. That's number one issue with the BRICS expansion. The second one is about the BRICS challenges, which I'm going to speak about. Uh, we have the first speaker talking about the dollar system. One has to understand, interestingly, let me talk about China is the biggest elephant, dinosaur, whatever you call it, in this room. Over the period of time when China talks about decoupling, de-risking with the US economy, essentially it is playing with the dollar terms, right? It is not definitely trying to de-dollarization. When it talks to President Trump, it is not saying that we want to de-dollar it. It talks very clearly about dollars, right? So we are in a system where BRICS countries are increasingly talking about local currency settlements, but in practice, the dollar system is going to have a serious problem because this entire grouping is talking about a system which is going to displace dollar, which is the most dominant currencies, while renminbi is trying to dislocate or delocate the dominant currency. It looks pretty challenging for uh, BRICS countries to talk about de-dollarization or maybe dollar systems. Now, the problem with de-dollarization is that it looks attractive as a slogan or maybe as a theme for BRICS forums, BRICS meeting, academic, ministerial, whatsoever within or including the summit level meetings. But when you talk about operationality, we have a serious problem here because the challenge is not about how emphatically, how rhetorically, how energetically we put down the question about de-dollarization. The question is, do we have an alternative? BRICS certainly needs interoperable payment trails. We need to have the trusting clearing mechanisms. We're talking about FX liquidity backstops, settlement disciplines, common messaging standards. And along with this thing, we have a problem, how we're going to have the, deep local currency bond markets. Now, that creates a serious system and challenges in front of BRICS. So what we have been talking in some of the forums is, uh, pardon my openness over here, is it's just a superficiality of, BRICS, or de-dollarization. There are larger problems with regard to the dollar. Let's come to Iran. We are all living with it. If you just talk about, nobody's covering the system actually. The oil prices, gas prices in China has grown up by about 12 to 15%. The oil category 93, 95, 97% in China. I mean, talking about the consumer sales have gone up by 12 to 17%. Okay, that is the volatility. If you just take any raw data available, this is available on IMF sites and WTO sites. Take raw data of last 20 years. Try to figure out what are the volatilities the global south, global majority has been facing, fiscal stroke, monetary stroke, currency. You will see that maximum 80% of the volatilities have been created by the G7 countries or the countries which are dominant. Because no wonder the countries which are middle run countries, low income countries, do not have capacities to create panic in the market. The panic has been created by those who are dominant. So those who have been affected by the panic do not have a role to change the structure, but to save from the impact of the volatility. So the entire ball game is different over here. In that context, the problem when I try to look at the Iraq war, Iran war, you would see that most of the hydrocarbon prices have been increasing. Okay, those countries which have the deeper pockets, which have their reserves, can sustain, maybe out-sustain this pressure for a couple of weeks. China has a huge reservoir, but they're still increasing the prices because they want to get straight away, benefits from the increasing the prices. But when the Iran war is happening, as the WTO predicts, this is going to have a major problem vis-a-vis the world merchandise and growth is concerned. It is going to drop anywhere between 0.7 percentage to 0.7%. So that means that the BRICS cannot present itself as just a stabilizing pole, within the members, but also it is very important if it takes the larger responsibility, posing itself as a larger, responsible, accountable member for the non-member countries. Let's come back to the supply chain. Supply chain, as I said, among the political economists, it has become one of the most fashionable word, talking about fashionable terms, including supplies. But what most important thing for us is that while uh, most of the merchandise used by, use the trade, sea trade, it is becoming a challenge, not more about whether we are going to shorten the supply lines, supply chains, or lengthen the supply chains. The question is, when Iran war happened, it questioned about the freight volatility, premiums, insurances, checkpoint risks, geopolitical disruptions. So I think we are living in a world. I think BRICS challenges have entirely changed. What was there in 2007 and 8, what was there in 2017 and 18, and what are there in 2016 when India is enjoying the presidency of BRICS. So as a result of it, BRICS has to move beyond generic talks. I know we need to be pretty serious. I think I need to be serious here because neither I'm a diplomat nor a nor a bureaucrat over here. I've been very frankly speaking here. We do talks, that's all right. But I think what are the most issues we have solved so far? 2 decades on, BRICS is talking. What we have solved, anything which we have solved. I mean, the problems heterogeneity is increasing, and I think that is bringing more uh, problems with regard to the challenges BRICS is facing. Couple of quick points before I wind up. Trade fragmentation. Okay, the trade fragmentation is majorly eroding the multilateral order the BRICS talks about, and BRICS wants to defend it. Now talk about China's sheer weight inside BRICS. I'm taking about all positive and about uh, concrete ideas over here, but the China's influence in BRICS is increasing, right? Are we talking about a second order legitimacy system, a problem in BRICS?
or if BRICS is supposed to be more multipolar. We need to give a serious thought to these problems. Institutional depth. The new development bank is certainly doing a concrete work, in providing finances, being more resilient over there, but it remains limited with regard to the scale of infrastructure and crisis financing is discussed. So we still see that there are several problems NDB is facing. Dilma Rousseff in her last year's uh, 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 speech in Poa Forum openly spoke about it. BRICS needs to show relevance, okay, beyond, again, to be very practical, beyond the summit declarations, because the relevance of BRICS will be gauged vis-a-vis the deliverables. How much BRICS is delivering in trade settlements, in national currencies, whether BRICS is talking about cheaper development finances, if BRICS is serious about food and fertilizer coordination, resilient energy corridors, semiconductors and critical mineral cooperation, and crisis diplomacy. So I just want to underline while I wind up that heterogeneity is still there, but the problem has multiplied the challenges which the BRICS countries are facing. As a presidency in this year, India faces much more steeper challenges compared to earlier few years. Absolutely, as my first panelist said, the next presidency, which is going to be of China's, is going to set the different tone. So what we are going to fulfill and achieve in this year is going to definitely set, a significant influence on the BRICS turning around or BRICS curve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Yelery. We've spoken about the challenges that BRICS faces as a bloc. Now, we all agree that it needs to develop a more concrete framework. But at the same time, given the situation we are in right now, do you think, leaving the ideological differences beside or behind us, it's really time for the BRICS bloc to focus on economic engagements, to focus on boosting economic trade engagements? Do you think that will bring the bloc closer and give it a more meaningful platform? Maybe, Mr. Elashmawy, if I may start with you, because Egypt has joined the BRICS, you know, just 2 years ago. So, as a new member of the BRICS bloc, what would you be expecting? What would you be looking from BRICS?
Well, thank you for this question. Look, I believe ideological convergence is something really natural in the world. You can't have one platform that assemble many countries without having differences and convergence. And that's why the BRICS is based on consensus. And hence, the presidency have a load of work to try as much as it can to bring that consensus. And every member country must make concessions to achieve that consensus. So for the part of ideological differences, that's normal for us. And as I said, we must promote the dialogue between us so we can find a consensus. That was the idea of the BRICS. The idea of the BRICS is a platform for cooperation, okay? Mainly economic cooperation and development. But the whole idea is about cooperation between global South nations. And that's why what we expect from it, actually in Egypt, we have identified five key ideas where we can work during this year. So I will tell it to you really quickly. The first one is enhancing trade flows.
Between the BRICS blocs?
Between the BRICS, all of this is between the BRICS bloc, of course. The second one is the local currency settlement mechanism. And here I want to say something important, that reducing over-reliance on a single currency is not confrontational. It is a prudent risk management. Egypt supports the gradual expansion of trade and investment in national currencies, gradual, step by step, because we see that this will lower transactional costs and mitigate the exchange rate risks and strengthen our financial sovereignty. The three final keys identified: the digital cooperation, of course, and infrastructure financing and institutional reform within BRICS. because we advocate actually for strengthening BRICS economies and mechanisms while keeping the group agile and consensus based. Even though, despite the, as you said at the beginning, the
Right.
ideological divergence and all of that. So yeah.
Dhanuraj, if I may ask you, you spoke about the currency bit. You spoke about the fact that BRICS is not really about de-dollarization, but at the same time, trade in local currency has gone up. Now, do you think going ahead, like what Mr. Elashmawy also said, that the thrust is really going to be, using more and more of national currency, and that is going to sort of mitigate risk, and in a way, it is going towards de-dollarization?
No, I think I'm very realistic about this when we say about local currencies and trade. We have recent evidence where, for example, we were buying oil from Russia, paying in our currency. After a point, I think our good friend from Russia will agree. There was a question about what are we going to do with the currency that we are storing here. So basically, I think the BRICS or BRICS Plus, I don't know why we are using BRICS Plus here, but anyway, BRICS Plus has to improve and strengthen their local economies, the domestic economies, because you have to improve your manufacturing, you have to improve exports, you have to build your human resources so that economy grows. When your economy grows and more transaction happens, when you have more productivity improves, when your service sector improves, there is a reason why these countries will trade each other. Then you have a reason why you want to use your local currency, your domestic currency to trade with somebody else, right? So unless otherwise that happens, I don't find any immediate reason there will be some global compulsions for us to do certain things at this point of time, but that is not a sustainable one. Probably incremental changes will be there here and there, but otherwise, even among, I think it's 100 billion. India is doing some 100 billion US dollar trade with among the BRICS members. So if you have to increase to 150, for example, you said, I think in the beginning you said 35% is the
Global.
Now think about, and there is also a forecast by 2030 BRICS will cover around 50%, but I doubt that now in the present context, because there are a lot of changes happening, and when from 35% to 50% has to become a reality, you have to do a lot of internal domestic changes. And our fellow panelists talked about China, why China has a heft, and I think 14th of May president is traveling to Beijing, and why he is little soft or soft when you talk to China, but not soft to country like other member countries here. So you have to improve.
Mr. Mahafha, you spoke about institutional capacity and the need to really expand institutional capacity to give BRICS more teeth. Can you expand a little on that, please? And how does BRICS bloc really gain that and work towards building that institutional capacity?
Uh, Hello. Yeah. To my understanding of the question, after it was bombarded on me, and then digesting it, uh, this word institutional capacity. If one can go to the African Union now, they are always talking about institutional capacity, and therefore, as a main problem for the African countries, to address their challenges. So to me, this institutional capacity, although I indicated that no, well, I strongly concur with what was said by the previous speaker, that there is a need for the BRICS secretariat. So capacity building, I think, as a global South countries, there's a need for each, for an individual country before this block to be capacitated and then being together in order to go somewhere. We can agree that no, well, when we compare with ourselves with the West, we might find that no, well, there is a gap in terms of capacity building. So therefore, maybe when we are together and therefore we share our challenges and then our way forward and everything. This can enable us to take us to somewhere. So that is my understanding of the when I was emphasizing on the capacity building. In short, that's what I can say.
Professor Yelery, you spoke about the expansion of BRICS and the fact that the expansion is somewhat slowing down decision making process. Now at the same time, today of course BRICS is not just the original BRICS 5 but it's BRICS plus 6. At the same time, there are several other countries waiting to get membership of the BRICS bloc. Now, if that is the case, how do you see this expansion coming along and what impact will it have on the BRICS? Now, the other question I have, a related question is like the expansion also actually reflects on the growing influence of BRICS in this given situation. Your thoughts?
Okay, I mean, I'm not actually antithetical to the concept of expansion. Expansion is okay. Expansion is fine. In last 3 to 4 years, several of the multilateral forums have seen expansion. That's okay. But expansion comes with some prioritization, which I think in the case of BRICS and BRICS Plus um, did not happen in that way. So the expansion was not synchronous to the prioritization. Okay, synchronous to the prioritization of NDP and what will happen to the the reserve blocks of the NDP. What happens to the financing? It just did not happen. Expansion to me happened from a more political optics than economic optics. UAE has not accepted it. Okay, if you talk about expansion, now Indonesia had joined the expansion, where the Malaysia is an observer state here. Now, if you look at the capacity of Malaysia and Indonesia, you will find a starking difference over here. Malaysia has a more robust, finance mechanism. The currency is much stronger. That Malaysia is much stronger economy in Southeast Asia than Indonesia, and then Indonesia has applied, and then Indonesia has gotten the seat, and not Malaysia. But Malaysia wants to be, a part of expanded BRICS. Most welcome. That's not a problem. My idea is actually when you get these resilient economies from the different geographies, it should add spokes to you know, the resilience of the entire BRICS bloc. If that is delivering, expansion is most welcome. That's not a problem. Okay. Now, the second question, Mahua, you asked about.
The fact that several other countries are waiting in the wings to get BRICS membership, don't you think that actually reflects the growing influence of BRICS as a bloc?
So there is no doubt that BRICS influence, let me call it, because in political term, popularity is increasing. That's perfectly fine. But again, my underlining question too is that all five original members, I seriously doubt if all five members were on board when the expansion was discussed and then the timeline of the expansion was discussed among the five original members. I mean, there is no point we talking about this, but why I'm talking about this thing, then we are talking about BRICS plus and plus. This should again come on the table. So uh, the influence of BRICS is growing. That's perfectly fine. But I think somewhere the BRICS forum and original five members, which were happy of discussing the differences in the manner of soft power or heterogeneity, is that happiness still exists? I mean, I seriously doubt. I give example of Brazilians. Brazil is not happy. Lula is definitely not happy. You just go to talk about most. Brazil is the only country after China who had just swamped with a lot of BRICS center. Brazilian government gives any center with the name or entitlement BRICS a handsome funding. You go and ask them. They're not definitely happy, at least in the academia and research and think tanking. Expansion has not really got something big for the Brazilians. So the two things, expansion, good, brings in accountability, but accountability need to be weighed or counterweight how much deliverables we're doing over the period of time. Institutions like BRICS are going to have more voice, more presence on global multilateral forums, but the challenges will be much steeper, much steeper, which was there until few years back. And not within, not people who are aspiring to become a member, but the all mutants of Trump.
Trump 2, 3, 4, 5, that becomes a difficult thing for us. So it becomes more challenging for BRICS to, stand to that expectation, and that expectation is quite overloading for us.
Questions from the audience? Yes. Can we have the mic, please? Yeah, sure. I think you're audible. Yeah.
Very engaging discussion. My question is to Dr. Dhanuraj. Sir, this year India's presidency is there. Do you think in the current contemporary developments that are happening globally, the discussion, the deliberations are going to be limited to trade and finance, or do you think global governance and geopolitics are also going to be on the table this time when India is there?
I don't know. I don't have any ears and eyes to the in the corridors of North Block, but I believe one major development probably all of us should focus on. I think you remember what happened in 2021 during the COVID time when Shanghai Cooperation meeting happened, how it happened online. I really wish, this is not going to be an online meeting. Second, because unless otherwise you have the big people coming to Delhi, right? I don't have to mention who are they. We are losing the relevance, right? So I think the New Delhi will wait for that right opportunity. I think how things are going to evolve in the next few months, especially with the today's ceasefire and how things are going to change in the next 15 days. And energy would be I believe no one as I spoke already about economies and how to strengthen economies. So probably that could be a major focus. Second, the energy would be a major focus. I think we may try to avoid the big political discussions. You remember what we did for G20? We had lots of interesting topics and conversations. Probably we will adopt the same idea here.
Questions? Any other questions, please? Now, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ratish. I'm from Organization for Research on China and Asia. My question is for Dr. Yelery. I think you made some very excellent points. Just trying to understand your assessment on how do you see India and China coexisting within the BRICS. On the surface level, both parties and both countries have shown a cooperative element. But if you dig a bit deeper, if you look at the NDB and the kinds of financing that is taking shape, there has been some discontent. Or you look at BRICS Pay, for example. I mean, during 2024, we were able to get it into a declaration, but there seems to be, again, discontent between both India and China, how to proceed on that. So just trying to understand how you see India and China coexisting.
Let me draw a much larger canvas over here. You must have been reading about the India and China economic relationship, and recently we have changed the press note 3, the Niti Aayog report, and we have been pretty open to the Chinese investments. So there has been a logic and discussion argument happening in the policy alleys and also the corridors of think tanks that uh, there is nothing wrong if China subsidize India's manufacturing, because we have to benefit from it. There is nothing wrong to be selfish as a nation state. Everybody is trying to be selfish over here, from Indonesia to Brazil and to Africa and Europe. There is nothing wrong. You put national interest as the first thing, So if that is going to save 2 steps for India, buying few products. I'm talking about everything here. Electronics is only one component over here. Electronics is maybe textile, right? Which is the second largest employer generator in India. So when it comes to multilateral forums, when it comes to BRICS, or maybe it comes to AIIB, the government of India and the India stand has been very consistent. That when it comes to the global financing, when it comes to the global contraction and access to technologies, India definitely supports joint efforts in fulfilling those joint goals. But when it comes to problematic areas, there has been some AIB projects and NDB projects been funded
by the Chinese, which were not falling into the India's interest, we raised the voice. So to be in the grouping in the multilateral forum gives an access to India to raise the voice instead of not being part of the multilateral forums that we don't want to be because this looks like something fishy for us, like our RCEP it happened. My my stand, as an academician, is that you need to be on the table to raise your voice. You cannot be out of the room. Forget about the table to raise your voice. So it is good mechanism for India, and India has been doing it quite consistently. In 2015, when we started drafting about AIB, we agreed to be an AIB. When we talk about NDB, we wanted to be on the NDB because we wanted to monitor it, we wanted to regulate it, we wanted to analyze it. So we are closer to the decision making. So I see no confrontation, as far as we being on the same table and same forum, multilateral engagements happening with regard to finance, monetary decisions. We have to make that bold decisions that we have to be part of it. Certain complications which have arisen over a couple of times, we have been very deliberate. Like we have been quite consistent, making China understand that these are our reservations. RCEP we do, right? So we had been quite straightforward in that case. We were not getting anything. So I think I don't see an inconsistency in having China on board or China having India on board. Rather, I would let me put it very frankly over here, and I think this is not a very bold statement over here. China needs India more on multilateral forums than India's and otherwise, what I'm saying, right? So as a result of it, within China, if you talk about, you talk about different reports which have been brought out by the private equities or the public equity or the banks or the policy banks by the Chinese. You talk about the CDB, you talk about ICBC, you talk about the Silk Road funds. If you just go and access the reports, they say that there is an available options in the Indian market or the markets where India has been an active agent. So we should not be compromising our agencies if China sees an opportunity in that. Rather, we should be using it as our vantage point. We should be talking more about our vantage point instead of closing ourselves thinking that there are Chinese. So let it be. We should use it for our benefit, and whatever brings benefit to us as an India, we should be grabbing that as quickly as possible.
Any other question, please? Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm hoping this is Chatham House. My name is Ishan Joshi. I'm Director and Senior Fellow at the Pahle India Foundation. The question is for anybody on the panel who would like to take it. A, we were talking about BRICS expansion. Is there a case to be made for an exclusion stroke inclusion criteria? B, what are the lessons from the European Union in terms of their expansion for BRICS in terms of, again, coherence and effectiveness versus expansion? Anybody would like to take it?
Since I'm holding the mic, let me be very selfish over here. No, I not purposely I held the mic. Okay. So the question about the BRICS is, again, this is Chatham House. I think beyond Chatham House, I think I want to be very strict over here. The expansion was never discussed in the BRICS meetings. Ministerial meetings, we were very consistent about, very conscious, and we did not agree to the expansion in the academic forums because there are different formats that happens: academic forum, ministerial forum, and the summit meetings. We have never been, coherent, as far as expansion was concerned. The second thing is, were there any criteria? Okay, there was no criteria as such. That's the reason. No, that's what inclusion for the inclusion. So the expansion happened based on the inclusions, not on the exclusions. But why? When the question of exclusion comes, when you have two players and two countries from the same region and with the different capacities, then the question of inclusion is here. Now you have a Brazil here. Brazil is not in the room, but Brazil have serious apprehensions about Argentina and Mexico, right? Indonesia has a very straightforward apprehension about including Malaysia over here, right? And let me be very frank and open over here. Most of the forums which have been happening, whether that is last year it happened in Rio, before that Joburg, before that in Fuzhou, I don't know why Pakistan is on the table. I'm seriously worried about this. And then it makes me look like, it becoming more like, more than heterogeneity, but a political agenda by certain members. Again, I don't want to take the names of the members. So there is a rising question mark, numbers of question mark. If we came up into existence with a one question mark, there are already five question marks which BRICS is carrying on his shoulder. Absolutely good question, and I think one needs to really answer this thing. Uh, you have a minister from Pakistan and addressing a BRICS summit. For me, it's like a surprise. Why? I mean, yeah.
Just follow that up with a quick comment. In fact, I think the lack of rigor in establishing these criteria will ultimately reflect in the organization's coherence and effectiveness. So I think there's a part working through. And incidentally, let me plug my book, which I co-authored with Dr. Rajiv Kumar recently, called Everything All at Once, 6 Global Transitions We've Identified. A lot of the stuff we're talking about structurally, we try and, at grand strategy level, try and explain. So thank you for that. Also, my follow-up, Dr. Dhanuraj, if you'd like to take it about the European Union, because that has had its own
Ups and downs. Yeah.
issues in terms of expansion, and now we're seeing a very new situation develop there. Any
No,
lessons
how
from
many?
BRICS?
Yeah. We all know how many years, how many decades it took to evolve as a union, right? We are talking about some institution in the early stages, nascent stages. And I think the discussion here is all about what's the traction some of these countries are getting, right? And these are all some emerging economies. And in the global forum now, what are those platforms these countries can represent and voice? So I think things are again changing now. I'm sure last few months things have again changed. The traction that BRICS had in the past, let's say 2-3 years back, still hold that traction is a question that we should ask. One. Second, I think the realignment process, when the emerging economies are, the so-called emerging economies, there are two things. There's one realistic one. Do you look at the data and see like these are emerging economies? Certain countries are like, they claim that we are emerging economies, but you look at the data, you're not convinced about emerging economies. And given the geopolitical order and the geopolitical development, the emerging economy status will also be challenged now. See, for example, the energy could be a big reason why some of the countries' growth will be slowed down. I mean, for example, India's forecast now is 6.9. I mean, so if 6, right? And the growth will recede, and then the traction that we get on the BRICS will also be challenged. So I think I don't want to compare with ASEAN or European Union. I agree with the fellow panelists about expansion. I was reading about it. I was talking to a few people that time. Some of the things were like backdoor entry, or I should not say that, but it was happened over a table, and then even our leadership was surprised, I'm told.
Yes, please.
I'm Ayush Upadhyay. I'm from Campus Law Center, University of Delhi. My question to all of that: what are the need, necessary reforms? Please highlight some necessary reforms that are needed in the BRICS bloc. As we are expanding this bloc, we have just added some of 6 countries in the past 2 years. Please highlight certain necessary reforms that we must look towards that affects some global situation.
So that's a
Please,
very critical question he's asking. What are the necessary reforms that BRICS bloc needs to really look into to ensure that it has a more global influence? And maybe all of you can take a
and also just like Iran, it is now in the BRICS plus. Russia and other countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia, these are in the war situation. In Iran, UAE and Saudi Arabia, they are in in अपने आप में ही लगी हैं. तो how can we tackle that situation as a unit? How can we tackle our own member nation?
So how can BRICS be more cohesive, and what are the necessary reforms that BRICS as a bloc needs to implement to make it more effective? Maybe Professor Yelery, you could go at the question and
Thank
then
you, Ayush. Very complicated question, but very simple answer to that. I think BRICS came into existence with multiple variety of problems and contradictions, right? BRICS was set up to bring in cohesiveness. In past 2 decades, we are trying to look for the cohesiveness, and as I said, beyond cohesiveness, what has happened in last two decades is that multiple problems and challenges have occurred. Okay, you have note the inertia dynamo theory. What has happened while we are matching up with the external forces, we have to also match up with the internal challenges. Most of the countries in BRICS have been facing these dualities. While we are trying to, for example, India, we have these several of welfare schemes. We have sustainable schemes to which the government is committed, right? The moment we talk about it, we have to we have to ensure that that capital and funds are available internally, and then match that up. So when we talk about externally, so the BRICS challenges with this, BRICS has these two different problems. One is most of the countries are facing the internal challenges to stabilize and as well as use that thing to be visible and create a force collectively to stabilize the external forces. That is something phenomenal. Okay, this is something. Now you have the two levers running, and the two levers are running in two reverse sides, and you still have the cars running, right? So this is different kind of a physics here. That becomes quite different. And now you just add different spices to this. What are different spices? You have a country which is energy dependent. One is energy exporting. One is not bothered about tariffs. One is super bothered about tariffs. So you have these problems, dealing with internal challenges and external challenges, posing itself as a collectively. And at the same time, you have a challenge, how you're going to face with these dynamic challenges. I have given the recent examples of expansion. So it is, of course, it's a good idea that BRICS should have something cohesive. But the problem to reach that cohesiveness, we are slowly building the block. NDP is the first fantastic multilateral forum came up with the best idea. Have its own bank means that we have your own financing. Finance is a major problem. So any organization which comes up with own initiative to do financing, refinancing, have the better say, better alignment. Now the problem is that when you have the weaker performance of this financing, nobody's calculating it. Just go and talk about the NPAs, non-performance assets, which the BRICS or the NDP has over the period of has accrued. How much of the loans have been, paid back? That creates different set of challenges, and I think making that uniformity
is going to be
is a
challenging. Yeah.
challenge.
Mr. Mahafha, would you like to specify the kind of reforms you would be looking at?
In joining Prof, yes, indeed, it's a complicated question, but to Prof, it was easy to answer it. In my case, I think the question was covered under the roadmap, what we wish the BRICS to be. I think what was said there, it has to do what we expect BRICS to be. So this will contribute into the reforms of the into reforming the BRICS bloc. So I don't have many more words, but I can just refer that we covered it under the roadmap. Thank you.
Mr. Elashmawy, would you like to go for it, please?
Yeah, I would like to go for the expansion. Just briefly to say, expansion in itself is not a bad thing. In the contrary, it's something that we need. And BRICS actually is a well-suited platform to absorb all the different economies, especially from the global south. Maybe the timing, here we're speaking about the timing, maybe, and I'm not saying this as my capacity as an Egyptian official, but maybe at this time, the BRICS is not eager to expand during this time. Surely later, but maybe for now not.
Dhanuraj, your comments.
Okay, I don't want to end this conversation with a pessimistic note, but I think there are fundamental challenges as a group BRICS are facing now. I mean, echoing the sentiments shared here in terms of expansion and different interests and different ideological positions in various matters. I think the reform is to start with India's presidency, probably a better understanding about the why there's a coherence, consensus building in terms of institutional framework, for example. How do we build on that? Is something that India has to push now. And second, I see nobody talked about code, for example, here. Right? I mean, what happened to code? Now nobody talks about code. Now all of a sudden, everybody forgotten God. So there is a reason, because what is the relevance and what is the positioning of code, and there was all the four members had different ideas about code. I think it is a time for us to think about how, as a block, as a platform, we build consensus. Of course, consensus is the very idea of BRICS, and that's been happening. But in terms of what is the focus, right? Are you standing for global peace or global economic growth? Are you standing here for global strategic intervention and global security, inclusivity? So that is something that, as a charter or as a framework, we have to roll out now in this year.
Well, with that, we would like to wind up. We would all agree that BRICS bloc and the expanding BRICS bloc is a reality today, and the need of the hour is to really build consensus, give it more teeth, and bring out a proper framework. And like you said, maybe a secretariat which actually works for the betterment of the global south. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we close, may I call upon Bharat from Spark Forum. Thank you very much, Bharat, for organizing this. And if you could just hand over the mementos to our panelists. Thank you so much, Bharat. Yes. Please, you can just. Thank you so much, Dhanuraj. It was a pleasure. Thank you for your inputs. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. Elashmawy. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Mahafha, thank you so much for coming and giving your thoughts. Thank you so much, Professor Yelery. It was a pleasure having you over, and your ideas were absolutely, I'm sure things will work out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bharat. Thank you for doing the honors. Thank you very much, and we will open for lunch. Please download the Secretariat app before we just close. Do that, and please join us for lunch. Thank you very much.